Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Gearworks by Peacekeeper Games. Gearworks is a 1-to-4 player, almost Sudoku style puzzle game in which players are placing cards down onto this grid over here. I should note this playmat can be bought separately, not part of the base game over here, but you're placing cards down onto the grid in order to earn sparks and in order to earn parts of pieces that you'll use towards building contraptions, which I understand doesn't tell you that much about the game, but we'll get to all of that soon. This is from Peacekeeper Games, from Kirk Dennison, and it's an older game, but I believe they're still selling it, and I think there's a crowdfunding campaign. I'll have a link to that down below, where you can go ahead and get the game, the playmat, some promo cards, and things like that as well. But with that, let's talk about the game. Throughout the course of the game, throughout 3 rounds of play, you're going to have your own hand of cards, and currently I have it set up for a 3+ player game. There's some adjustments you make in a smaller game, but we have 2 hands of cards just so I can show you some basic gameplay. But throughout the course of the game, you're going to be placing cards down into this grid following certain restrictions. And the restrictions are that you can only have one color per column. So for example, this yellow card I have over here cannot go here because there's already a yellow card in that column, so can't do that. The other restriction is you have to be mindful of following that every row has to be in either ascending or descending order. You pick, or at least you pick while you still can pick, and then after that you can't. So for example, just to give you an example right over here, right now, if I place a 2 over here, then this row over here will be in ascending order from left to right. Versus if I place a 4 over here, then this row will be in descending order left to right. Also, you can't place that 2 green here because there's a green here, but that's just you guys. I'm keeping you on your toes. That's the goal of that. But anyways, so you're placing cards into these rows, defining the order, and once the order is defined, other players have to respect that order. Once you place a 4 here, we're going to go ahead and rotate these cards to show the arrows, just in case you had any confusion there, and now you can only place anything higher or equal to that number, meaning in general, you can place the same number next to the same number. So again, I could do that, if not for the yellow over there, but you have to go ahead and have either the same number or higher or lower, depending on the order you're going in. So that's the general placement rules. Well, why are you doing this? Well, every time you place a card into a row, you get to rotate the 2 gears on the row and column to show your color. And if they're your color at the end of the round, you'll get those parts. So for example, let's say I go ahead and place this 4 over here, defining the row accordingly. I'm going to go ahead and rotate these to orange. Orange over here, and these are now showing that this row is currently rewarding orange. So at the end of the round, if the round were to end right now, I would get these 2 parts, which I can use towards building contraptions. Contraptions are going to show different parts on them. You can see the 2 different parts from the row and column, and if you earn those parts, you can use them towards building the contraptions over here, getting points for doing so. You can get 4 points for building 1 contraption and 5 points for building both contraptions on a card. Versus on their own, they're only worth 2 points. So getting a little piece over here, that's 2 points no matter what. Being able to place it onto a contraption card is going to be either 4 or 5 additional points, depending on if it's the first or the second, which means you want to go ahead and try to get those contraption cards and the matching contraption pieces. The problem is, this is not the last card that's going to be played in this row or column, which is where the game starts to get into a degree of trying to tactically plan out around your hand, but being able to use sparks, because you can use sparks to draw new cards, you can use sparks to draw new contraptions, and you can even use sparks to play cards over other cards. So you're going to have a flexibility from these sparks you're gaining, but you're also gaining sparks by trying to play little number games with the way these cards work. And what I mean by number games, just to give you one example, if I were to place this card down over here, then right now, first of all, it would define the row as being this way, because I can go ahead and now orient it this way. We're going in ascending order from right to left. And additionally, because of the fact that I have right now 4 minus 3 equals 1, I'll also get a spark when I do that. Now, specifically, the way you do that is whenever you play a card, you're going to have up to 4 cards in adjacent directions. It doesn't matter if they're touching, but you look at the first card in every direction you can, and if you can do a mathematical equation, either addition or subtraction, that results in your number, then you're good to go. So for example, if I have over here, if I placed, if this 4 had been placed over here, then it would have oriented this row this way, but then 1 plus 3 equals 4, you'd again get that spark. And so you're trying to get these sparks because sparks buy you flexibility. You're trying to play cards though, because cards ultimately determine the orientation of these gears. So for right about now, when the next player goes and they take a look at the board, we have a 5 over here. In fact, let's go ahead and place this 5 down here. I know I could place my 7 here. The tricky part is the 7 has that, so I don't know if I can place that. You know what? Let's go ahead and let's stick with this one. Actually, let's go ahead and place this. You know what, you could mess with people a lot. So here's one of the fun things with the game that you could do, is you could specifically and intentionally try to mess with people. So for example, if I place this here, not only is this a legal placement, because it's now in ascending order, it also has only one color column. We're going to go ahead and orient these to, let's say, purple. Let's pretend this player is purple. But what we've also done by doing this is we've made it very hard to play cards over here, because you can now only play 1s or 2s over here, limiting the options for the players. Not as much for myself though, because I have a 1 and a 2, giving myself potentially more flexibility than the other players. Although not a guarantee, because there are other colors, and in fact right now we also have 1, 2, 2 on this hand, not that I knew that when I placed that card. But this gives you the opportunity for a lot of plays. You want to tactically plan around what your hand's going to look like to give yourself as much flexibility. You want to go ahead and utilize those sparks to be able to place cards on top of others, or even draw new cards as you need them, and you want to be mindful of when you think you're shutting other players out of plays throughout the course of this game. You're going to do that until the entire board is done, or more specifically until the players pass, which you can play. Once players pass, you can keep passing until everyone passes. You can buy your way back in if you've already passed. A bunch of things you can do with sparks listed on this player card over here, listed on the player aid. But past that, once everyone passes, you're going to go ahead and resolve all the various parts, use those parts for the contraptions. Any parts and contraptions you don't utilize will go off to the side. You'll still score points for the parts, but less so. And then you're going to go ahead and repeat with rounds 2 and 3. And then lastly, the last thing to cover, although not a rules video so much as an overview, but the last thing to cover is you have specific player bonuses over here. Players are going to have different bonuses, different bonus cards you can utilize, giving you different benefits you have to be able to utilize these cards. So for example, you can swap two gear cards in the grid. That gives you a lot of flexibility, especially when somebody messed you up. Or max, play 2 gear cards instead of 1, and these are one time. You can go ahead and cash them and tap them, show that you utilize them. That is basically how you play Gearworks. Which brings us to a review, starting off with ease of play. Ease of play, I believe there's actually a revised rulebook that's been put out in anticipation of the campaign. I think that's the case. But past that, the actual rulebook with the game, I didn't find it that hard to learn. Although, disclaimer, I should note that I did originally learn this game from the designer, so I did have to dive back into the rules to refresh myself on it, but I was walking with that framework, so it's hard for me to be perfectly. Again, I know that they're putting out a new rulebook. I didn't feel the need for it, but then again, I had to teach, so take that into account. Past that, I think the game is pretty straightforward. It's not your most intuitive game because of the nature of, well, how you're playing cards and what you're doing in this game, and even just the fact that throughout the course of the game, you're going to be trying to basically place cards down, which is basically a placement puzzle, but the thing you're earning is sparks, and you're earning the possibility of getting components at the end of the round, but not a guarantee because other players can get in the way, which means your first few plays are almost about setting things up and just buying yourself flexibility and planning the grid. It's only as the board gets locked in that you're actually earning the things that'll give you points, which is a little non-intuitive. You kind of have the feeling that when you play a card, you should be rewarded, and hopefully you are, but it's more about the setup and the sparks as you first play, which again, not necessarily intuitive when you first dive into it. Past that, the game is fairly straightforward and doesn't overstay its welcome. Generally, I'd say games are going to run you 30 to 45 minutes, although it can slow down a bit. This is an AP-prone game, but we'll get to that. In any case, let's go ahead and dive into what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which the biggest thing is around that planning aspect, that opportunity to think through, to look at your hand, to see patterns, to understand that you need to be mindful of the grid, to see the starting cards in the grid, and to be able to plan around where you think your cards will go, and where you're going to place things both to keep the board open for yourself, but also to lock it down for other players. That's going to give you a lot of opportunity for planning, both in terms of planning to help yourself, as well as for the screwage aspects that go into hurting other players, which can be overall a satisfying little puzzle. That, combined with the sparks you earn whenever you do that mathematical equation, gives you a little bit more things to think through as you go through it. So you're trying to think through multiple levels. You're also trying to think through which parts do you need. At the end of the day, a part is worth points no matter what, but it's worth far more points if you can get it on the right card, which means you need to go ahead and earn those sparks so you can grab the cards, but you need to make sure you're controlling the grid at the same time. It pushes you in different directions as far as things to consider, giving you a lot of things to think about while you're playing through the cards. So it very much rewards that forethought. It rewards seeing patterns in the grid, and it rewards multiple pathways as far as trying to just the order of what you do things. You want more contraptions, you want more gear cards, as much information you have as possible, the better you can plan, but you need to play things to earn those sparks and go ahead and get those gear cards. I should note there's another way to earn sparks. We can get sparks as a catch-up mechanic at the end of the round, in between rounds, but I won't heavily go into that. But overall, just lots of forethought and planning going through the game. The fact that you can get yourself out of a hard spot with sparks gives you a nice little, not as punishing as it otherwise would be, because otherwise you can find yourself stuck out of playing things things very quickly, and the combination of player abilities plus the spark. So even just the ability to overlay a card gives you a lot more flexibility, and so it means that you're never totally stuck in a tough spot as the game goes on. As far as things I don't like in the game, a few small things. First of all, it is AP prone, or it can be AP prone, AP being analysis paralysis, the idea that you just sit there and try to overthink exactly where things go. I have seen players slow down at this game. I slow down at this game, so it is a little bit AP prone, lots of staring at the board and lots of staring at your hand. I'd say for me, the bigger issue I have with the game is that kind of I touched upon a little bit in the ease of play, which is that non-intuitive aspect where a lot of the game is about trying to set yourself up so you can actually get those parts, more so than actually locking things in. I find that a big part of the game is about that setup, and if to me, playing cards down, knowing full well that you're like, hey, well, once this fourth card is played in this column, this card is more likely locked. Not guaranteed, because again, there's things you can do in the game to get that back, but the idea that as you play cards, you're really kind of vying for optimal positioning and sparks more so than points. Kind of every time I play it, I kind of spend, I would say that to me, half the game doesn't feel like I'm executing as much as I'd like on the main thing that gives me points, even though there is planning and setup there. So there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of looking at my cards, a lot of playing things down, and then ultimately the last person to get each row or column gets that part, and I found that specific aspect, which is unfortunately is a key part of the game, a little less satisfying. I like the placement puzzle. I like the little spark initiative and trying to think around that. I like trying to think through how to open up the board for myself. I like trying to think about how to punish the board for others. I don't like the fact that most of what I'm doing doesn't directly translate into getting me the things that give me points. So I can play a lot of the game very well, and the other player can have the cards they need and get things in, or even just have the sparks they need and overplay and all that, and they'll go ahead and lock in those additional components. So I find there's a little bit too much comes down to the final blow, so to speak, so much as setting things up. And in games that have final blows mechanic, I usually don't love that, and it's weird because this is more of a Euro game, but it kind of has that final blow mechanic, which I don't really love, and that unfortunately is a big part of the game. As far as things I can see others not liking, first of all, the gameplay can be mean. I appreciate these screwage plays a lot. I appreciate things like playing this 1-2 and just seeing players unable to get themselves out of the situation, meaning I know my hand and I know that I can continue to play cards and they can't, although of course, as you saw over here, sometimes you just do that and another player has a 1-2-2 anyway, so that kind of thing does happen. But if you don't like the screwage play, this game does have locking other players out of plays. It gives you tools to get around and to get out of it, but you have to spend for those tools or utilize your abilities. So if you don't like any degree of screwage in your games, I don't think this is for you. And other times you'll just be stuck with a bad hand. Especially at a higher player count board, this board can very quickly iterate into something that if you don't have the right cards, you can't play on. And again, you have the tools to get yourself out of that, but those tools all cost sparks, and you have a limited resource of sparks. So if you don't like those kind of feelings, this might not be as much for you. As far as final thoughts on Gearworks, I overall enjoyed the puzzle of what's going on. To me, the biggest thing about it is the fact that while there's a lot of thinking through, there's a lot, again, I guess the way I'd put it is, for me, the biggest thing that holds me back from enjoying this as much as I would like to is the fact that the puzzly gameplay, which I enjoy, feels very disconnected from actually earning points, and it feels like only the final plays matter as much, and the rest is a lot of setup. And again, it does matter. The setup matters. Earning sparks matter. They definitely do matter, but I still feel like it's more of an arc as you get towards the end of the round. Things matter a lot more, and that means that for me, big portions of the game feel more like setup than the actual closure and execution of what you're doing, which takes me a little bit away from it. For me, this is a 3 out of 5. An overall fine game, but one that I wish the tight gameplay and the puzzly nature was more rewarding throughout the entire experience. If you're looking for other game recommendations, first of all, I recommend Mission Control Critical Orbit, which has a bunch of things going on, but it's very much a real-time game, a cooperative real-time game of survival in space. But one specific aspect of the game kind of had the same puzzly, like placing things down, trying to make sure everything fits. And I do like that style of game. I like how it's very often a puzzly mechanic, and I like seeing it implemented in games. And Mission Control Critical Orbit has that done there as well. And additionally, if you just like the pattern of cards and trying to figure out how to place things in a way that rewards you as you place them while thinking through multiple lanes of how you have to place things, highly recommend checking out Arboretum. It's a tree laying game where you're basically laying different trees down, but you have this whole ascending order aspect going on that can be incredibly rewarding, especially as you have to figure out how to maneuver multiple trees in your Arboretum to score points as efficiently as possible. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.